you need a downhill bike in your stable, or has the latest generation of enduro bikes made them obsolete? We know that downhill bikes are a specific tool to complete a specific job, and they are the best bike in the world for riding 10/10ths against the clock on gnarly tracks. But what about non-racers? Well, we're here at Bike Park Wales to put an enduro bike and a downhill bike to the test. Before we start, thanks to Madison for sponsoring this video and keeping me warm and dry in the latest kit. Click the link in the description for more details. On with the show. If you were a serious gravity addict in the 2000s and early 10s, you needed a downhill bike. Chances are you rode the local trails near you and then took a trip to the Alps in the summer. Trail bikes of the time had short travel, steep geometry, and often weren't up to the rigours of hardcore descending. Fast forward to the present day and there are less downhill bikes in the uplift queues, even though there are more bike parks and trails everywhere have grown way more gnarly. And we have bikes to match, as modern enduro bikes have big wheels, aggressive geometry and heaps of silky suspension. Their light and tough components make sure that they're up to the rigours of the gnarliest descents. But first, let's take a look at how they compare to downhill bikes. The first point might be an obvious one, but the difference in suspension travel between these bikes might surprise some of you. Downhill bikes usually run 200mm or 8 inches of travel front and rear, with a dual crown fork up front. Although many enduro bikes are still available with around 160mm of suspension travel, many enduro bikes have been steadily increasing the amount of travel they offer and are now closer to downhill bikes than ever before, with some running 180mm or even 190mm of travel. However, this is still a little less than a full downhill rig, and although some really gnarly bikes like Specialized Kenevo e-enduro bike do run a dual crown fork, they're still very much in the minority. Enduro bikes went 29er long before downhill bikes, but now downhill bikes have come into line. Both downhill and enduro bikes now have a 29-inch wheel up front and are often available with either a mullet setup and a 27.5-inch wheel on the rear, or as a full 29er. Enduro geometry has been creeping closer to downhill geometry every year, with some enduro bikes' head angles now reading even slacker than downhill bikes. Take this Intense Tracer 29. It has a 63.7 degree head angle and a 480mm reach on the large. Compare this to the equivalent Commencal Supreme DH. The downhill bike is only 0.4 of a degree slacker and 4mm longer in the reach than the enduro bike. That's flip chipping close if you ask me. If you want to find out more about whether we've hit peak geometry, click the link here, but not before I hit the trails on these bikes. Modern downhill bikes are marvels of engineering. Light enough to save riders energy when accelerating, but strong enough to shrug off the toughest hits. Enduro bikes have more gadgets to squeeze into their packaging, like dropper posts, wide ratio cassettes, in-frame storage and bottle cages. However, they're also concerned with being as light as possible to save riders energy when turning up the hill. In the past, enduro bikes have generally been lighter than downhill bikes, but due to the demands on enduro bikes increasing, and with the tech they're now expected to carry, enduro bikes are comparable in weight to modern downhill bikes. Punctures can ruin downhill races. They can ruin enduro races too, but at least there's an opportunity for racers to stick a plug in or use a canister to re-inflate the tyre. With downhill, it's win or bust. Because of that, downhill casing tyres are built tougher and heavier than enduro tyres, although with stiffer casings appearing on enduro bikes and riders in both disciplines considering running inserts, the weight difference between enduro and downhill tyres is becoming less. Downhill bikes have low seats set out of the way for when riders are descending in the attack position. They also have close ratio cassettes coupled with large chainrings, allowing racers to bang through the gears quickly when sprinting. Contrast this to enduro bikes. They have a dropper and the seat can be lowered out of the way for descending, like a downhill bike, but can also be effortlessly raised at the touch of a button when the terrain turns uphill. Enduro bikes also have smaller chainrings and wide ratio cassettes, allowing gearing to be selected which is appropriate for climbing steep hills or for blasting high-speed fire roads. Here we are at the top of a black run of Bike Park Wales. It's got many of the features that you'd find on a typical downhill track. I'm starting riding on my downhill bike, as I have done on this course for many years, although the course has changed and so have the bikes. Okay, here we are on Enter the Dragon. It's fast, it's jumpy, it's a proper downhill track. Stable. The travel's really nice on the rough bit because you've got bags of grip, loads of travel. The extra weight really makes it easy to stay on your line, as does the extra travel. Feels confidence and inspiring in the air. Okay, it's a little bit sluggish to get started. The Enduro bike does pedal really well. Traction wise, I've got loads of grip on the downhill bike. It's really confidence inspiring in terms of the stability on the straights, which is nice. Feels like you can go faster and feel like really quite stable. Whereas on the Enduro bike, you start going faster and you're like, oh, she's a bit twitchy. Soaks up the bumps super well. Love it. Okay, that's it for the downhill bike. Let's try some back-to-back runs with the Enduro bike. So I can feel it's carrying a bit more speed than the downhill bike, thanks to less travel. But it definitely feels less stable in the air. I'm getting blown all over the place. Oh, go big over there. Okay, actually, I think with the wide handlebars and the geometry, it feels almost as stable as the downhill bike. Perhaps a bit less grip than the downhill bike. The stability wise, it's not that bad. You can feel it moving around more. It's definitely a little bit lighter, but it feels a bit more playful, especially on the jumps. Okay, the bike sprints really well compared to the downhill bike. Definitely a lot more pedaling energy into going forward, which is nice. Feels really fun on the jumps. Easy descend, easy descend. Carries twice the speed compared to the downhill bike. Real pleasure on the jumps. Super fun. Well, that was awesome fun. There's nothing I like better than tackling big jumps and rough terrain at high speed. Downhill riding is awesome. But what about the bikes? Well, the downhill bike gave me an edge on the rough stuff and felt more planted. It wasn't as entertaining to ride, but it was reassuring to have the peace of mind that the beefy downhill components could survive the thrashing I was giving them lap after lap. The main thing with the downhill bike though was the wider margin for error when riding at high speed. The descent focused geometry and extra travel meant that the DH bike was more confidence inspiring on the limit. But the Enduro bike surprised me. Despite the lack of travel, it certainly didn't feel slow, and I felt the lighter weight and more playful handling allowed me to be more precise with my line selection. I'm not even sure which one would be faster on this track. In conclusion then, a modern Enduro bike will allow you to safely and successfully hit most of the terrain you could tackle on a modern downhill bike, without even offering much of a time penalty over the full downhill rig. The downhill bike's major benefit is the tougher components, offering you greater longevity, especially for riders doing chairlift access seasons in mountain ranges. Overall, modern Enduro bikes are almost as capable as downhill bikes, especially on UK tracks. But Enduro bikes remain a much more versatile tool, as crucially, you can ride them back to the top. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, click the like button and subscribe for more. And why not find out if I can ride every trail at Bike Park Wales in one day by clicking the link here. I think Max was drying off the auto cue, and I was standing there, and suddenly the glass flew in a graceful arc out of the auto cue onto a massive pile of boulders, and unfortunately it did not survive.
It's all lies.
Yeah, it's fine, totally fine.